Hey everyone, this is Matt from MMOs.com, and I'm back today with another foreign feature. Today I'm going to talk to you about Journey to the West, the latest game from Leyou Entertainment. Journey to the West originally launched in China on December 20th of last year, and is not to be confused with the Journey to the West International that you knew here in the West, or any of the myriad of other titles that have been based on the well-known Chinese novel over the years. Immediately upon starting up Journey to the West, you will notice that despite being a brand new game, it looks dated. Animations are very obviously missing frames and don't link together properly. Like, when you're in the character selection screen, when you click on a character, it'll kind of jump up in the air for a second, but then it'll just snap back to the ground, the animation having stopped midway. Also, when you get too close to any of the textures, they look really obviously pixelated and blurry. Once you get to the character creation screen, you'll learn that there are 4 classes that are currently available. They are Warrior, Mage, Assassin, and Healer. A 5th, called Archer, is on the character creation screen, but it's not currently available. Each of these classes is unfortunately gender-locked, but can be customized by choosing a face, a hairstyle, and your character's height. Unfortunately, most of the customization options are simply terrible. I mean, look at these hairstyles. They're just so bad. Once you've created your character and made it into the game, you'll notice immediately that Journey to the West starts out like many other MMORPGs. You follow a main quest line through a starter zone, during which time you're mostly just clicking quest objectives to autopath you to where you need to go. Fortunately, the game doesn't have an auto-combat feature, meaning that you will at least have to manually fight enemies, but that alone doesn't save the game from a largely monotonous questing experience. The starter zone is also a bit of an oddity in that while you were there, the game instances you out in a bizarre manner. I played the game with Kat, and we found that while I could see one other player in my time in the starter zone, we couldn't see each other. Kat actually couldn't see anyone at all. However, returning to the starter zone later, this wasn't an issue. We could see each other just fine. Another oddity is that you don't get your first set of skills until level 7. Up until then, you are stuck auto-attacking everything you come across. Fortunately, you level fairly quickly, so you won't be stuck auto-attacking enemies for that long, but the first few levels certainly can feel time-consuming. Once you do begin unlocking skills, the skill system can be a bit confusing. You'll unlock skills and skill upgrades at certain levels, but instead of putting points into your skills, skills cost money to learn or upgrade. Certain skills will also require skill books to learn, but upgrades to said skills do not. Furthermore, oddly there is a skill tree of sorts, but the tree structure doesn't seem to matter much. Skills are largely locked behind levels rather than other skills levels, and the layout doesn't seem to make much sense anyways, with some skills supposedly leading to the unlocking of unrelated passives. Around level 10, you will get your first pet. Pets will join you in combat and level with you as you kill various mobs, and later on, they can also be upgraded directly by simply spending in-game currency. You will later also receive a mount that, oddly enough, can be upgraded and has its own set of stats that require you to manually distribute stat points. At one point during your time in the starter zone, you're required to complete a solo dungeon in which you control a fantasy mech. At first, this seems like a pretty cool introduction to the game's dungeons, then you click the autopathing button and watch your character run past every mob in the dungeon and go straight for the boss. This wouldn't be a problem in and of itself, but the dungeon contains dozens of mobs, and you will barely have a scratch on you by the time you reach the boss. At level 17, you leave the starter zone and are sent to a central hub city that you will be calling home for the rest of your time in the game. Here you will find NPCs that can upgrade your gear, level your trade skills, give you daily quests, and more. It should be noted that the main quest line will send you to new zones, but you will always return to the city at some point. The city is also somewhat of an enigma. Whereas I have a high-end computer that could usually maintain a steady 60 frames per second in-game, my frame rate would often drop to around 20 frames per second while I was in the city. Normally I'd say that there were too many people around and that they were causing the frame rate to drop, but the largest number of players that I saw at any one time was somewhere around 20, so I'd like to think that that wasn't it. At some point during your first tour of the city, once you've gone through a certain number of obligatory main quests that introduce you to all of the city's NPCs, you can begin doing side quests that are specifically designed to help you level. These consist of largely uneventful tasks such as visiting a dungeon that contains a single enemy, buying a specific item, talking to a person, tending to a flower, or even talking to the same NPC again for what might as well be a free experience. They tend to get monotonous quickly, but they provide you with even more experience than the main quests do. There's also an NPC that will give you enough experience to level 2 or 3 times for simply talking to him, and this isn't even a quest. The process of doing side quests is made even more monotonous by the fact that side quests are randomized solo tasks. Not only will you not be able to complete them with friends, as many of those that don't require you to actively seek out an NPC and either talk to them or buy something from them will instance you out, it's possible that you will find yourself doing the same side quest 3 or 4 times in one day. If that weren't bad enough, your monotonous side quest experience is often held up by the game's dreadful autopathing. For some reason, the game's pathfinding algorithm can only navigate the terrain. When faced with a bridge, it will either path you all the way around a mountain to get you to the other side of the bridge, or if you're already on the bridge, it will throw you off of it, instead treating you as if you were on the ground. When in areas where there are a lot of set pieces, you will often get stuck on the smallest of objects as the game's pathfinding algorithm simply doesn't know how to navigate them. While this is uncommon outside of the main city, it is still extremely frustrating. Around the same time that you unlock the ability to do these side quests, you unlock the ability to join a family. Families are one of two in-game player organizations, the second of which is gangs, and they provide players with a set of family-specific quests. These will mostly consist of trade quests in which you watch a rat-like character carry goods from the family management NPC to another NPC. I haven't explored the gang system yet, but joining a gang will unlock various in-game activities. Activities are a category of content that includes dungeons and grind zones, as well as missions that can only be completed at specific times of day. If all of that weren't enough to make you feel like the game is constantly trying to throw ways to level at you, for every half an hour online, you will also get an orb that, when used, will grant both you and your pet experience. You can see the countdown timer to your next orb at any time by looking at an urn that sits at the top right of your screen between your minimap and your quest log. When an orb is ready to be collected, the timer will disappear and the urn will set ablaze. Once you hit level 20, the game begins enforcing a rather weird requirement. You will have to level manually by going into your character menu and pressing a button. I'm not sure if the reason that the developers chose to do this is so that you have to look at your character screen and you'll likely be reminded that you have stat points you need to use, but when I hit level 20 on my first character, I thought that I was irreparably stuck at level 20 until I finished a certain quest. I hit something like 1.5 million out of 200,000 experience, and I had been working on level 25 quests by the time that I realized that the glowing orb near my hotbar meant that I could level up. At some point during all the questing that the game throws at you, you will be required to upgrade your gear. There are two primary ways in which you can do so. You can either spend money to nominally upgrade it with a 100% upgrade chance, or you can enchant it by spending a certain type of item on it. The item needed to enchant your gear will change depending on the gear in question and its rarity. In my experience, the enchant system is fairly unforgiving. There's a 100% chance of enchanting a piece of gear to +1, but later enchants have significantly lower chances of success. Should any enchant fail, that piece of gear will be reset to a +1 enchant. The game also has 5 trade skills, but they can ultimately end up feeling like another money sink. You learn a trade skill by walking up to an NPC and buying the first level of that skill. There's a quest you can grab for each trade skill to earn some extra experience when you buy the first level of that skill, but you can still buy it without the quest. Because the trade skill system works like this, you can learn all 5 trade skills. Once you have a trade skill, you will earn experience by completing any actions that fall under that skill. For example, you can earn experience in alchemy by creating certain pills and powders, or you can earn experience in fishing by, well, fishing. However, once you have the experience needed to level, you are required to return to the NPC that you bought the first level of the skill from and buy the next level of that skill. Unfortunately, this process can be a little bit painful as certain gathering actions take way longer than it seems that they should. I previously mentioned that there are dungeons other than those that you have to complete alone. These are part of the activities category of content that you can do at any time, and they feature a limit on the amount of times that you can run each one in a single day. Each dungeon that I saw has at least a 4-star difficulty rating, whereas grind zones have a 1 or 2-star difficulty rating. Having played earlier dungeons, I thought that it would be fine if Kat and I jumped in and took on a 4-star dungeon as a 2-player group. I was wrong. The dungeons at your level are actually difficult, and a single group of 3 or 4 mobs can deal enough damage to you that the instant full heal potion that you get as an earlier quest reward and the healer class combined can't keep you alive while the potion is on cooldown. Given that we had run the dungeon as a 2-player team that consisted of a mage and a healer, I'm not going to rule out the possibility that a team consisting of a warrior and a healer might be able to complete these dungeons without any other players. That being said, given my experience, I wouldn't recommend it. Even with dungeons and daily activities, I get the feeling that there isn't much waiting for players beyond the main storyline. The world feels small and the core gameplay loop seems fairly focused on daily quests and activities. You can flag yourself for PvP and PK players in most parts of the world, but it doesn't seem that anyone is taking part in PvP to begin with. I would have tried it myself, but the only players I ran into outside of the starter zone and the main city were at least 10 levels above me. There are also some structured PvP activities, but I haven't tried them out as it didn't seem wise at my level. To make matters worse, it seems that no one has reached the level cap. Whereas you can reach level 30 in an hour and a half or so if you know what you're doing, the highest level player I saw on any of the game's leaderboards was level 53. While I don't know what the level cap is, you unlock your last skill at level 60, and you get a ring early on that requires you to be level 100 to wear it. Beyond what has already been mentioned, the game has a number of other problems. Perhaps the most prevalent problem is the way that the game handles quests when in a group. Kill quest progress is separate, requiring all members of the group to have at least tagged each mob for it to count towards their kill quest. Even more frustrating is the fact that when a quest objective requires players to summon bosses using a specific action, all players in the group could be standing in the same place, fighting the same boss, but each player will be fighting a different instance of said boss, and each player will have to complete said quest objectives separately. The way that the game handles experience gains also doesn't make much sense. Two players could complete the same quests, and one player could still be significantly ahead of the other. In fact, when we played, Kat had actually completed a quest that I had never received, and she still fell 2 levels behind me. I had to actively stop doing daily quests to let her catch up, and despite doing far fewer daily quests, she was still a full level behind me. I'm also not sure that the classes are balanced. Whereas it makes sense that the healer wouldn't have much damage output, I found that, at least at low levels, the warrior could deal far more damage than the mage, especially if you make use of the class's low-level lightning attack. This is rather frustrating as warriors have significantly more health than mages, but can apparently do more damage than mages as well. There are also times during the main storyline that the game tries to be cinematic with moments like this and Lynchian shots like this, but it ultimately fails at every turn. This may be in part due to the fact that every single cinematic moment like this consists of 3 or fewer lines of unvoiced dialogue, but the moments that the developers chose to make cinematic certainly didn't help the fact that each attempt at being cinematic was utterly underwhelming. The game client itself also has a number of oddities. You can move many UI elements around freely, but they will reset when you close the game. Game settings such as volume don't save between characters. When in full screen mode, you cannot manually set the resolution despite the fact that it lets you choose one. It will always use your desktop resolution instead, which is odd because the game doesn't support borderless windowed mode. If you attempt to pull up the help menu, an error stating that help.dll doesn't exist will appear and the game will crash. Yes, I am serious. Based on my time with it, it's hard to recommend Journey to the West. It has dated graphics and gameplay that remind me of a time when IGG was still releasing games like Tales of Fantasy in the West. It has a small world, an unforgiving enchant system, confusing and inconsistent experience gains, a poor questing system that doesn't support playing as a group well, an unstable client that is missing many modern features, and far too much of a reliance on doing daily activities to gain experience in what seems like a nearly endless grind. The fact that the game has been out for 2 months and no one has reached the level cap means that it is extremely hard to level after a certain point, the game isn't retaining players, or perhaps even both. Ultimately, there are people playing the game, but they are few in number, which likely has to do with what seems to be an insubstantial endgame. Should you want to check out Journey to the West, there are links in the description. Until next week.